वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. Chapter 2. व्यास उवाच इति सम्प्रश्नशिरष्टो विप्राणाम्रो महर्षिणिः प्रतिपूज्य वचस्तेषां प्रवक्तुम् उपचक्रमे.
Hare Krishna. Ugrasrava Sutta Goswami, the son of Romahansa, being fully satisfied by the perfect questions of the Brahmanas, thanked them and thus attempted to reply.
Vastu Sutta Uvacha Yam Pravrajantam Anupetam Petkrityam Dvepayano Virakatar Ajuhav Putreti Tanmayataya Taravo Binedustam Sarvabhuta Radayam Muni Manato Asmi.
Srila Sutta Goswami said, "Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto that great sage Sukadev Goswami, who can enter the hearts of all. When he went away to take up the renounced order of life, sannyas, leaving home without undergoing reformation by the sacred thread or the ceremonies observed by the higher caste, his father, Vyasadeva, fearing separation from him, cried out, 'Oh, my son, indeed only the trees which were absorbed in the same feelings of separation echoed in response to the bereaved father.'"
Verse 3. Yam svanubhavam akhilam shruti saram ekam adhyatma dipam tirsatam tamundam sansarinam karunayaha purana guhyam tam vyasa sunam upayami gurum muninam.
Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Sukha, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who, out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge, after having personally assimilated it by experience.
Verse 4. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiriyate.
Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, unto Nara Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author.
Verse 5. Munayah sadhu pushtoham bhavadirlokamangalam yat kritaha krishna samprasno yenatma suprasidati.
O sages, I have been justly questioned by you. Your questions are worthy because they relate to Lord Krishna and so are of relevance to the world's welfare. Only questions of this sort are capable of completely satisfying the self.
Verse 6. Savai punsa paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahetukya pratihata yayatma suprasidati.
The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can obtain to love and devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated and uninterrupted to completely satisfy the self.
Verse 7. Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojitaha Janayayatsu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yadahetukam.
By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires costless knowledge and detachment from the world.
Verse 8. Dharmaha svanusthitaha punsam visvakshena kathasuya nutpadayedi ratim sram eva hi kevalam.
The occupational activities a man performs according to his own position are only so much unless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the personality of Godhead.
Verse 9. Dharmasya hi apavargasya na artha arthaya kalpate narthasya dharmikantasya kamo labhaya hi smritaha.
All occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service should never use material gain to cultivate sense gratification.
Verse 10. Kamasya nendriya priti labha jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa nartho yacheha karmabhihi.
Life's desire should never be directed towards sense gratification. One should desire only a healthy life or self preservation, since a human being is meant for inquiry about the absolute truth. Nothing else should be the goal of one's works.
Verse 11. Vadanti tat tattva vedastva tvam yajnanamadayamaha brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti sapyate.
Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagwan.
Verse 12. तत्सृतानामुनयो ज्ञानवैराग्ययुक्तया पश्यन्त्यात्मनि चात्मानं भक्त्या श्रुतगृहीतया.
The seriously inquisitive student or sage, well equipped with knowledge and detachment, realizes the absolute truth by rendering devotional service in terms of what he has heard from the Vedanta Shruti.
Verse 13. अतः पुंभिः द्विजश्रेष्ठाः वर्णाश्रमविभागशः स्वनुत्थितस्य धर्मस्य संसिद्धिर्हति तोषणम्.
O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation, according to caste divisions and orders of life, is to please the personality of Godhead.
Verse 14. तस्मादेकेन मनसा भगवान् सान्त्वतां पतिः श्रोतव्यकीर्तितव्यश्च ध्येयः पूज्यश्च नित्यदा.
Therefore, with one pointed attention, one should constantly hear about, glorify, remember, and worship the personality of Godhead, who is the protector of the devotees.
Verse 15. यदनुध्यायिना युक्ता कर्मग्रन्थेन निबन्धनं छिन्दन्ति कुविदतस्य को न कुर्यात् कथारतिम्.
With sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding nuts of reactionary work karma by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message?
Verse 16. Susrusoho sraddhanasya vasudeva katharchihi shanmahate sevya vipraha punyatirtha nishevanat.
O twice-born sages, by serving those devotees who are completely freed from all vice, great service is done. By such service, one gains affinity for hearing the messages of Vasudeva.
Verse 17. Shrunavatam svakatha Krishna punya sravana kirtanaha ridyanto storya bhadrani vidunuti srihatsatam.
Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma, the super soul in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotees, cleanses desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotees who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Please forgive Prabhu any mistakes. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Usha Mataji and Pramila Mataji, for that nice recitation. So welcome, dear devotees, to today's chat session. We'll continue with the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter number 2, chapter entitled Divinity and Divine Service. And today we shall be reading and discussing text number 3. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Pradhan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutidevi Pranamami Hari Priye. Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vashadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Dishtarine. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Yasvanubhavam Akila Shruti Sharamekam Adhyatmadipam Atithi Satam Tamondam Samsarinam Karunayaha Puranaguyam Tam Vyasasunam Upayami Gurum Muninam. Word for word translation. Yeah, he who Swa Anubhavam, self-assimilated experience, Akila, all around, Shruti, the Vedas, Saram, cream, Ekam, the only one, Adhyatma, transcendental, Deepam, torchlight, Ati, Titi, Satam, as desiring to overcome, Tamaha, Andam, deeply dark material existence. Samsarinam, of the materialistic men, Karunaya, out of the causeless mercy, Aha, said, Purana, supplement to the Vedas, Guyam, very confidential, Tam, unto him, Vyasa Sunum, the son of Vyasadev, Upayami, let me offer my obeisances, Gurum, the spiritual master, Muninam, of the great sages. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Sukha, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience. Purport. Would anyone like to read? We've got 3 paragraphs here. Can have each one devotee read each paragraph.
I can read, Prabhu. Can I read?
Yes, you can read Bhagavati Mataji, then I think I say Krishnangi Mataji, and then Seema Mataji.
Okay. It's the first one, the purport, yeah?
Yes.
Hare Krishna to everyone. In this prayer, Srila Sutta Goswami practically summarizes the complete introduction of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural supplementary commentary of the Vedanta Sutras. The Vedanta Sutra or the Brahma Sutras were compiled by Vyasadeva with a view to presenting just the cream of Vedic knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam is the natural commentary on this cream. Srila Sukadeva Goswami was a thoroughly realized master of the Vedanta Sutra, and consequently, he also personally realized the commentary, Srimad Bhagavatam. And just to show his boundless mercy upon bewildered materialistic men who want to cross completely over nescience, he recited for the first time this confidential knowledge.
Thank you, Mataji. Krishnangi Mataji.
There is no point in arguing that a materialistic man can be happy. No materialistic creature, be he the great Brahma or an insignificant ant, can be happy. Everyone tries to make a permanent plan for happiness, but everyone is baffled by the laws of material nature. Therefore, the materialistic world is called the darkest region of God's creation. Yet the unhappy materialists can get out of it simply by desiring to get out. Unfortunately, they are so foolish that they do not want to escape. Therefore, they are compared to the camel who relishes thorny twigs because he likes the taste of the twigs mixed with blood. He does not realize that it is his own blood and that his tongue is being cut by thorns. Similarly, to the materialists, his own blood is as sweet as honey,
And although he is always harassed by his own material creations, he does not wish to escape. Such materialists are called karmis. After hundreds and thousands of karmis, only a few may feel tired of material engagement and desire to get out of the labyrinth. Such intelligent persons are called gnanis. The Vedanta Sutra is directed to such gnanis. But Srila Vyasadeva, being the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, could foresee the misuse of the Vedanta Sutra by unscrupulous men, and therefore he personally supplemented the Vedanta Sutra with the Bhagavad Puran. It is clearly said that this Bhagavatam is the originally commentary on the Brahma Sutra. Srila Vyasadeva also instructed the Bhagavatam to his own son, Srila Sukta Goswami, who was already at the liberated stage of transcendence. Srila Sukdev realized it personally and then explained it. By the mercy of Srila Sukdev, the Bhagavatam Vedanta Sutra is available for all those sincere souls who want to get out of material existence. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Can I start?
Sima Mataji, yes, you can do it.
Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam is the one unrivaled commentary on Vedanta Sutra. Shripada Shankaracharya intentionally did not touch it because he knew that the natural commentary would be difficult for him to surpass. He wrote his Sriraka Bhashya, and his so-called followers deprecated the Bhagavatam as some new presentation. One should not be misled by such propaganda directed against the Bhagavatam by the Mayavadi school. From this introductory shloka, the beginning student should know that Srimad Bhagavatam is the only transcendental literature meant for those who are Paramahansas and completely freed from the material disease called malice. The Mayavadis are envious of the personality of Godhead, despite Shripada Shankaracharya's admission that Narayan, the personality of Godhead, is above the material creation. The envious Mayavadi cannot have access to the Bhagavatam, but those who are really anxious to get out of the material existence may take shelter of this Bhagavatam because it is uttered by the liberated Srila Shukdev Goswami. It is the transcendental torchlight by which one can see perfectly the transcendental absolute truth realized as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you. For the verse again. Let me offer my respectful obeisances unto him, Shuka, the spiritual master of all sages, the son of Vyasadeva, who out of his great compassion for those gross materialists who struggle to cross over the darkest regions of material existence, spoke this most confidential supplement to the cream of Vedic knowledge after having personally assimilated it by experience. So there are some very important words in this verse. Firstly, who is speaking this verse?
Sutta Goswami.
Sutta Goswami, yes. But Sutta Goswami, this is for the first time he's speaking, in this chapter. So he's, as is traditional in the Vedic and Vaishnava culture, before one speaks, one first offers glorification and honor to the spiritual master and the Lord. So here, Sutta Goswami is explaining or is offering his glorification of his spiritual master, Srila Shukadev Goswami. Srila Prabhupada says that it is the duty of the disciple to glorify the spiritual master. And then Prabhupada asks the question in 1974 in Rome, Italy. Srila Prabhupada actually spoke on this particular verse, and I was listening to it today. It was very enlightening. So Prabhupada starts his talk by asking the question, how does one glorify the spiritual master or the great saintly persons? And then Prabhupada answers his own question. And he says, by glorifying the activities. Glorifying the activities. So here we see in the beginning, that Sutta Goswami is doing this. He's glorifying the activities of Shukadev Goswami. And in particular, he glorifies Shukadev Goswami's speaking of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And how Shukadev Goswami, by speaking the Srimad Bhagavatam, he is delivering the gross materialists who are caught up in the darkest regions of material existence. And then he uses the word swa anubhavam, self-assimilated or experienced. Now, one may ask the question, what is the difference between hearing, Shravanam, and Swa Anubhavam? So just like we have two terms, Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan means knowledge, and Vigyan means realized knowledge. So we also have hearing and self-assimilation. Like on Saturday we spoke about the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat. The person Bhagavat is the living Bhagavatam, means one who has fully assimilated Bhagavatam into their lives. And Prabhupada says in this lecture that we should only listen to those who are Swa Anubhavam. We should listen to Bhagavatam from those who are Swa Anubhavam. And Prabhupada says, in today's times, we have many professional reciters of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada says they are very expert in reciting the verses of the Bhagavatam and presenting the Bhagavatam. But because they lack this one quality, the most important quality of Swa Anubhavam, the effect when they speak is not there. Is not there. I was listening recently to Mukunda Hari Prabhu giving the Srimad Bhagavatam class in the temple. And he was saying that how he has one friend. Whenever there's a Bhagavad Katha, he always goes, wherever it is, even sometimes overseas, when these professional reciters are speaking, he always makes a trip, sometimes even taking a plane and going to India to sit. And one time, he was telling Mukunda Hari Prabhu how he still cannot give up eating meat and smoking cigarette. And Mukunda Hari Prabhu asked him, says, you make such an effort to hear Bhagavatam. But why is it you cannot give up your bad habits? And in this lecture, Srila Prabhupada makes a similar point. Srila Prabhupada says that because they are not self-assimilated, they have not experienced the Bhagavatam, the effect is not there, the potency is not there. And often because the motive is to make a living out of reciting Bhagavatam, the effect is not there. So Shukadev Goswami was not like that. Shukadev Goswami he had self-assimilated it, he experienced, he was living the Bhagavatam. In the previous verse, we read about how he left home and his father Vyasadeva was running behind him. It is said that as soon as he came out of the womb of his mother, completely naked, Shukadeva Goswami left. He just left the place without turning back. And he was very, very afraid of becoming caught up in Maya. So they looked and looked and looked for Shukadev Goswami. But they couldn't find him. Eventually, Srila Vyasadeva, he came up with an idea. So he sent his disciples around the kingdom and he said, please recite these verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. And there is one very famous verse, I think it's from the 3rd canto, Aho Baki, where Uddhava, he's praising Lord Krishna and saying how we will not find anyone as merciful as Lord Krishna, who, despite Putana coming to him with the intention of killing him and poisoning him, he still gave her the position of mother in the spiritual world. So when Vyasadev's disciples chanted this verse, Shukadev Goswami went into ecstasy. And in this way, they were immediately able to capture him. So what they did is, they started chanting various verses from the Bhagavatam. And he was so captured by the verses of the Bhagavatam, he just wanted to hear. And he was just following them. And eventually, they brought him back to the house of Vyasadeva. So he was totally absorbed. Actually, it is explained that when Parikshit Maharaj sat down waiting to be instructed, there were thousands and thousands. Bhagavatam explains how from different parts of the universe, all of the great sadhus, saints and sages, they had gathered to hear because they could feel that something extraordinary was going to happen. So the Vyasa-san was there. And everybody was wondering who's going to sit on this Vyasa-san. Vyasadeva himself was there in the audience. And his own spiritual master, Sri Narad Muni, was there. But no one felt like they wanted to go sit in the Vyasa-san. But when Shukadev Goswami appeared on the scene, just naturally, everyone offered him the seat. You sit on this Vyasa-san, Shukadev Goswami. And Shukadev Goswami took the position. And in the audience was Sutta Goswami. And Sutta Goswami, by dint of hearing from Shukadev Goswami, he accepted him as his guru. It's explained that Bhagavatam has been spoken many times. There's different Bhagavatams. Sometimes you get Bhagavatam with 200,000 verses. This particular Bhagavatam is 18,000 verses. So Vyasadeva had spoken Bhagavatam previously. Narad Muni had heard it previously. There's one Bhagavatam spoken by the 4 Kumaras. There's an explanation in one of the Puranas how Narad Muni had heard it. But when Shukadev Goswami started to speak, it was so nectarian that both Vyasadeva and Narad Muni were feeling like they were hearing Bhagavatam for the first time. his presentation was so unique, so pure, that they were completely captured. And this Bhagavatam is so beautiful. Therefore, in the next verse, it says, Akila, all around, Shruti, the Vedas, Saram, it's the cream, Ekam, only one. So these words, 1, 2, 3, 4 words, are explaining that the Vedas are expansive. So Vyasadeva, he took the cream of the Vedas and he captured them in sutras, Vedanta sutras it's called. It's like condensed verses. He took the essence of the Vedas and he compiled them in the Vedanta Sutra. So Vedanta Sutra is saram. It's considered to be the cream. And the Bhagavatam is described as saram, the cream of the cream. Just like when we get milk and we boil the milk, the best part of the milk is, if you keep churning, is the cream. It's the essence. So this Bhagavatam is described as the essence of all Vedic knowledge. Sri Chaitanya is described as Amalam Purana, the spotless Purana. There is no other literature. Every single word in the Bhagavatam is about Krishna. And then it is said it is Adhyatma Deepam. It's described as a torchlight. Just like any person, if we are in a dark room or in a dark space, and then suddenly, if we are aware that there's light outside, our natural inclination is to run towards the light, to embrace the light. So in the same way, in this Kali Yuga is a very, very dark age, very dark age. But those who are intelligent, naturally, they will come out of the darkness and go into the light and experience rejuvenation when they are in the light. So in the same way, everyone in this Kali Yuga, we are in darkness. And being in darkness is not a nice existence. So when we come in contact with Srimad Bhagavatam, we are coming in contact with the light, the greatest light of all knowledge. And when we experience that knowledge, then we experience transcendental bliss. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about how Srila Shukadeva Goswami had thoroughly realized. And he had realized this by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from his very own father, Vyasadeva. Actually, from the time he was in the womb, he was hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada quotes this verse, Nigama kalpataro galitam phalam sukha mukha amrita drava. Forget the next word. Anyway, that this Srimad Bhagavatam, it is nectarian, but because it's touched by the lips of Shukadeva Goswami, it has become even more sweet. In India, there is mangoes, and it is said when a mango is pecked or touched by a parrot, those mangoes become the sweetest. They are the sweetest. So in the same way, Srimad Bhagavatam is naturally very sweet because it is nothing but the descriptions of the pastimes of Lord Krishna and his devotees. But after being touched by the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami, this Bhagavatam has become even sweeter. There is no comparison, Prabhupada. This Bhagavatam becomes even sweeter. And Prabhupada goes on to explain very nicely about how he uses a nice analogy of the camel. The camel is such a foolish animal that the camel eats the thorns from a tree. And when it's eating the thorns, its tongue is pierced with thorns and blood comes up. And the camel tastes the thorns or the twigs together with his blood. And he doesn't have any realization that his own blood is with the thorns. And Prabhupada says, similarly to this, the materialist, his own blood is as sweet as honey, and although he's always harassed by his own material creations, he does not wish to escape. In the same way that the camel, although injuring itself, still wants to eat the thorns and the twigs. The materialistic persons in this Kali Yuga, although they are still suffering, they still want to try to enjoy. And this Bhagavatam is meant for such people like us. And lastly, Prabhupada talks about the Bhagavatam and the Mayavadis. It's very interesting why Prabhupada talks about the Mayavadis. There's for one reason he's doing that, because he's saying that this Bhagavatam, because it's coming from Srila Shukadev Goswami, and although it's the cream of all Vedic knowledge, the Mayavadis, they will still not be able to access the Srimad Bhagavatam. Why? Why are the Mayavadis unable to read Srimad Bhagavatam? And the reason is, Bhagavatam is nothing but the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. Everywhere you look, it is about Krishna's Leela, personal Leela. And for the Mayavadis, anything personal, they feel material life means persons. Persons means suffering. So to get rid of suffering, we've got to negate all personalities. So they have no conception that a personality or the personality of Godhead could be the source of all bliss. And because they deny the personality of Godhead, they have no appetite for hearing about personal activities of the Lord. Prabhupada uses the word, they deprecate the Bhagavatam. They try to minimize its transcendental position. And Prabhupada says, because they are envious of the personality of Godhead, they are unable to access the Bhagavatam. And this is the most unfortunate position. When one has access to such pure nectar as Srimad Bhagavatam and not be able to accept it, those are really unfortunate. And Prabhupada says, even the leaders of the Mayavadis, Sripad Sankaracharya, he himself admitted that the personality of Godhead is supreme. But because they are envious, they will not be able to access Srimad Bhagavatam, which is very, very unfortunate. I was wondering if we should discuss any more, or is that past 8? Okay, let's just see if anyone's got any questions or comments. And then if there's no, we can maybe just speak a little bit more. So dear devotees, any questions or comments on this particular verse or reflections?
Just a clarification I had. The two verses sent by Vyasadeva to attract Sukadev Goswami back again.
Yeah.
I thought the one of them was from, well, both were from Canto 10. One describing Putna being liberated, and the other one Krishna's beauty in the Gopi Geet. Is that the first one? Was, I think you mentioned Canto 3, the Aho Baki Yam. From Canto 3. Was it that one, or was it the Putna liberation one in Canto 10?
My recollection was the one, it was the verse in the third canto. Was it the third canto? But it was the verse spoken by Uddhava, Aho Baki. Let me just see. I can't remember what was the second one.
Second one was the description of Krishna in the Venu Geet.
Okay. I can't find the best right now, but yeah, I will look it up. But my recollection from my reading, yeah, this was the 3:2:23. That's the third canto, second chapter, verse number 23, spoken by Uddhava. Alas, how can I take shelter of one more merciful than he? Then he was granted the position of mother to a she-demon Putana, although she was unfaithful and she prepared deadly poison to be sucked from a breast. That's my recollection from my reading, but I'll confirm that. Yeah. And he said when he heard this verse, then he went into ecstasy.
Yeah, there's beautiful two verses. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhuji, for a beautiful class.
Hare Krishna. And actually, when he went back, they couldn't convince him. They couldn't convince him to stay. Shukadev Goswami. Lord Krishna had to personally come and tell him that, don't worry, I assure you, you won't fall into Maya. And then he was appeased. Sri Shuka. Yeah, Shukadev Goswami is such a great personality. And when he speaks the Bhagavatam, it is so unique, this particular Bhagavatam we get. Any other questions or comments? Anyone? Dear devotees? Any reflections? Okay, there's a comment, Emma Mataji saying, I really like the eye-opening analogy of the camels. Despite miseries, we keep looking for happiness in these miseries instead of alerting ourselves to the dangers of the material world. Yes. Prahlad Maharaj calls it chewing the chewed. There's no juice, just like in the sugar cane. After you've chewed the sugar cane and you've extracted all the juice, all that is left is just the stringy bit. Nobody will want to eat that, to taste that, because all the juices come out. But despite there being no juice in the material world, still we are trying to see if we can get it. Therefore, Prabhupada so nicely says in this in this purport, Prabhupada says, there is no point in arguing that a materialistic man can be happy. No materialistic creature, be he the great Brahma or an insignificant ant, can be happy. Such beautiful words. So someone is unmuted. Achyuta Prem Prabhu, you wanted to add anything? No. Okay, Prabhu's muted himself. Okay, dear devotees, this is a very interesting chapter. Tomorrow we will continue reading. for the glorification. Actually, it was Shukadev Goswami. And once, one stage when Parikshit was sitting there, some of the great sages who were there, some of them had got some of the nectar of immortality. I don't know how they got it, but they had it. So one time, at one stage, they proposed to Shukadev Goswami, why don't we give Parikshit this nectar of immortality? And in this way, he'll be saved. He wouldn't be dying in 7 days. And when Shukadev Goswami heard this proposal by the sages, he chastised them so heavily. He said, what do you think? That this nectar is more potent than the nectar of Krishna Katha? Don't be so foolish to suggest such a thing. This nectar of Krishna Katha surpasses any so-called nectar of immortality. Because this nectar of Krishna Katha, it not only makes one immortal, but it takes one to the highest level of spiritual bliss. So Shukadev Goswami, he had assimilated, he had tasted Swa Anubhavam, that the Srimad Bhagavatam, that he felt any proposal to give Parikshit Maharaj this nectar of immortality was a useless proposal. Okay, so we should also take this. So there's a question here. Pada Sarati Prabhu. Hare Krishna Prabhu. When Shukadev Goswami told Bhagavatam, what is the age? And yet he said Swa Anubhavam. Is this referring to the parrot time in previous life? No. He was about 16 years old when he spoke Bhagavatam. He was Swa Anubhavam in this lifetime, in the body of Shuka, this Shuka. Not in any other reference. Okay, dear devotees, if there's no more questions or comments.
Prabhu, I've got one question.
Yes, Vishalini Mataji.
Sukha Goswami spoke 5,000 years ago, probably, or less. And then Sutta Goswami spoke at Naimisharanya as well. So was it done, what was the gap? Or was it simultaneously done,
I have the timeline somewhere. Let me just see if I have it on my phone. Now there were a few hundred years gap, Mataji. There was a few hundred years gap because Lord Krishna disappeared, and then Bhagavatam was spoken to by Shukadev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj, and then it was spoken thereafter to by Sutta Goswami to the sages of Naimisharanya. Maybe I will share that with you. No, I don't have it here. Just 1 minute. Where the different times it was spoken. No, but I'll share that with you. I'll share
Okay,
that.
thank you, Prabhu.
Your perspective. Okay, thank you very much, dear devotees. All glories to your service. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhuvescha,
Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo
Koti Vaishnav Nindaki,
Nindaki Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Premanande.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Wonderful class.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Prabhu. Hare Krishna.